Not glamorous, not sexy, a humble everyday product that most of us take for granted. But for Ruan Liping, those sockets were the beginning of a singular obsession: how to make something ordinary into something people could trust without thinking twice. That quiet obsession, combined with a practical engineer's mind and a relentless focus on quality, would grow into Gongniu, the company many in China simply call Bull, and eventually make its founder one of the wealthiest manufacturers to emerge from the country's manufacturing heartlands. Ruan Liping was born in 1964 in Zhejiang province, in a part of China that has long been associated with small-scale manufacturing and entrepreneurship. He trained to be an engineer, studying at the Water Resources and Electric Power program that later became part of Wuhan University's engineering department. After university, he was assigned to engineering work at a government research institute, a stable, respectable start. But even then, the practical impulses that would define his later career were visible. He repaired, tinkered, and when opportunity knocked, tried small businesses on the side. By the early 1990s, China's economic reforms were in full swing, and Zhejiang's factories and workshops were proliferating. Cixi, Ruan's home region, was filled with hundreds of small shops making electrical accessories, inexpensive sockets and power strips, often produced in backyard workshops. Quality was uneven, safety was inconsistent. For consumers, a socket seemed trivial until it failed. For Ruan, it represented a problem to be solved. He returned to his native region and, in 1995, together with his younger brother, founded what would become Gongniu Group. The mission was simple but bold: make sockets and power strips so reliable and safe that consumers trusted them. The company's early strategy leaned into the technical strengths Ruan had nurtured as an engineer. He invested in research and development, insisted on better materials and manufacturing tolerances, and treated safety not as a compliance checkbox, but as a brand promise. In a sea of cheap, disposable products, Bull staked its future on making devices that didn't break and didn't catch fire. That focus on safety and quality turned out to be a brilliant business play. Bull moved quickly from being a local workshop to a trusted domestic brand. Ruan was obsessive about detail: product panels, switches, internal components, the small engineering choices that decide whether a product lasts a week or a decade. When China released stronger national socket standards in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Bull wasn't just following the rules. Ruan's team was at the table, participating in standards discussions and ensuring the company's products met and often exceeded the new expectations. That alignment between engineering, regulation, and brand was a multiplier for trust. But trust alone doesn't scale a company. Ruan understood distribution and the psychology of fast-moving consumer goods. He engineered sales channels, positioned the products where consumers shopped for daily life, and slowly turned what was once a low-interest item into a category with recognizable brand loyalty. Bull's marketing wasn't flashy, it was reassuring. The company became synonymous in many people's minds with safety and dependability in household electricity. Growth accelerated as the company broadened its product line. From sockets and power strips, Bull expanded into charging adapters, LED lighting, digital accessories, and more recently, charging piles for electric vehicles. The business model followed a predictable, resilient path: dominate a basic, high-volume category, then diversify into related products that feed the same distribution channels and customer trust. In February 2020, Gongniu, under Ruan's leadership, took the next big step and listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange. The IPO was a milestone, not just for the company, but for the narrative of China's manufacturing rise. A family-run, domestically built brand transformed into a publicly traded champion. The market's early response was electric. Investors, hungry for defensible domestic brands and one of the few real household product companies in the A-share market, pushed the valuation into the tens of billions of yuan within days of listing. That market success translated to personal wealth for Ruan and his brother. Years of steady revenue growth and a concentrated ownership stake meant that, in a few short years, Ruan Liping had joined the ranks of China's billionaires. But even as his net worth rose, his business remained stubbornly rooted in the same principles that launched it: product engineering, attention to materials, and distribution muscle. Of course, the road has not been without bumps. Bull's fast rise attracted scrutiny and competition. In 2021, regulators investigated allegations of anti-competitive practices. A fine followed. There were also product safety incidents that made headlines, individual cases of overheating and quality problems that, in an industry built on trust, hit hard. These episodes tested the company's credibility and required a hard look at internal quality control systems, supply chain transparency, and public communications. For Ruan, crisis management was as much a test of leadership style as it was of engineering. Admit problems, fix the root cause, and then rebuild confidence. Part of what helped Gongniu weather those storms was the deep institutional muscle Ruan had built. Large-scale manufacturing facilities, thousands of retail outlets and reseller partners across China, and a culture that valued steady investment in product testing. The company's investor relations and public documentation show a business that takes regulatory compliance seriously, because in the low-margin, high-volume world of household electricals, reputation is a strategic moat. Beyond manufacturing, Bull's story is also a business school lesson in how to turn a commodity into a brand. Commodities compete on price, brands compete on trust. Ruan's genius was to identify the safety anxiety consumers had about electricity and to position Bull as the answer to that anxiety. That choice allowed the company to capture pricing premium in certain channels, win contracts with real estate developers and retailers, and build resilience against cheap imitators. There's a quieter side to the biography that gets lost in numbers and market caps, the entrepreneur's restlessness and curiosity. Sources who have profiled Ruan describe him as an engineer at heart, not a showman, not an opportunistic investor, but someone who returned again and again to the product and to the technical work that made the product better. Early on, he allegedly tried a handful of small ventures, market stalls, and even agricultural experiments, demonstrating a practical impatience for building something his hands could touch. That combination of tinkering curiosity and systematic engineering gave him an unusual advantage in a category dominated by mass-market suppliers. Ruan is also a local son who never fully divorced his roots. Gongniu's factories and headquarters sit in Zhejiang's Cixi city, itself a hub of small appliances and component manufacturing. That locale furnished an ecosystem: suppliers, tooling shops, a skilled but flexible workforce, and an informal network of entrepreneurs. Ruan used that industrial cluster to his advantage, more efficiently than a remote corporate center could. He could innovate faster, iterate on tooling, and manage supplier relationships with direct oversight. As Bull scaled, Ruan and his brother made choices about capital and control that are instructive. The company remained family-controlled for many years before strategic investors were invited in. That concentrated ownership allowed long-term thinking, investments in patents, quality systems, and product reliability that would pay off over decades rather than quarters. When Hill House Capital and other institutional players later bought stakes, it was both a validation of the Bull growth story and a recognition that the company could play at the biggest stages. And playing at the big stages brought new responsibilities. Public company status meant more transparency, more analysts on quarterly calls, and more scrutiny from regulators and consumer groups. Ruan adapted. Public filings show efforts to professionalize management, expand research labs, and beef up quality assurance. The company also pursued international expansion. The same products that sell in Chinese apartments can, if properly certified and marketed, sell in foreign markets, where safety is a compelling value proposition. Yet success doesn't erase the moments that defined Ruan's leadership. When product incidents hit the headlines, he was forced to confront an unpleasant truth. A brand built on safety cannot afford the perception of an unsafe product. He responded by ramping up quality testing, engaging with regulators proactively, and investing in product recall and remediation policies. Those decisions were costly in the short term, but strategic in the long run. They protected the brand's core promise. Ruan's story also reveals how a focused product company can find new growth in adjacent tech trends. Bull's move into electric vehicle chargers, for example, is not an accidental pivot. It's a logical next step for a company whose expertise is in power delivery and safety. The EV ecosystem needs trusted partners to provide charging infrastructure and home charging solutions. For Gongniu, it's an opportunity to anchor new revenue lines to existing channels. Real estate partnerships, retail distribution, and the household installation teams it already works with. There's a paradox in Ruan's rise. He built enormous wealth by excelling at the unglamorous. In an era obsessed with software and apps, he made his fortune in plastic, copper molding, and screw tightening. That's instructive because it reminds us that every digital economy rests on a physical foundation. Power and power safety, the mundane infrastructure of modern life, is a stable perennial market if you can secure scale and trust. On the personal side, Ruan has maintained a low profile compared with many public figures. He is described in public records as modest, deliberate, and intensely private about family life. He holds international residencies and has been listed on wealth rankings in recent years as Gongniu's stock performance and dividends elevated the family's holdings. But those rankings always sit behind the more important measure he seems to have cared about: the health of the brand and the durability of the business. What lessons does Ruan Liping leave for aspiring entrepreneurs? First, obsess over the product. Ruan didn't start with marketing or trend chasing. He started with engineering problems, how to make a socket safer and longer lasting. Second, treat regulation and standards as allies, not enemies. Being part of standard setting and compliance discussions is not just ethical, it's strategic because compliance becomes an entry barrier for competitors. Third, scale through distribution channels that make sense. Build relationships with the people who touch the product in thousands of ordinary transactions, not just the occasional big-ticket sale. Finally, accept the reality that scale brings scrutiny. Building a brand that aspires to ubiquity will attract attention. Plan for it with transparency and systems that can withstand pressure. Ruan Liping's legacy will be measured in a surprising metric: the number of households that can plug in a kettle or a phone charger and sleep a little easier because the product on the wall bears a familiar logo. For many Chinese families, Bull became shorthand for that small relief, a quiet brand promise that, in the everyday mundanity of life, matters deeply. In the end, the story is not merely about wealth. It's about the power of incremental technical improvements, the patient layering of trust, and the strategic choices that turn a commodity into a household name. Ruan Liping turned sockets into a business that matters, and in doing so, he made a case for the creative possibilities of manufacturing itself. If there's a final irony in his story, it is that a company named for strength and stubbornness, Bull, built its fortune on making things gentle and safe, small innovations that prevent sparks, switches that isolate power, and panels that endure. Strength in this case was not loud. It was meticulous engineering, steady investment in quality, and an insistence that everyday things deserve careful design. That stubbornness, practiced over decades, is what turned a socket into an industry and an engineer into a billionaire.